Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk, exploring the issues affecting all of our lives. I'm your host, Austin Harris. On today's episode, we return to Parliament at the first meeting of the 2022-2023 session, which was marred by controversy and heavy-handed politics that led to a member's boycott and concluded with the resignation of the Speaker of Parliament. With us today to dissect the proceedings and the ultimate outcome, it is our pleasure to welcome back in studios the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Roy McTaggart. Welcome back, Mr. McTaggart. It certainly was another unconventional meeting of Parliament. Would you agree?
I would have to agree with you, and it's amazing what emerges and way things play out these days in Parliament.
Yes.
It was an interesting time, no doubt about it. The Parliament sat for 2 days to accomplish its work, but it was not marred. It was marred by the opposition sitting out the session entirely.
Yes. Well, perhaps you can walk us through and our audiences some of the final points that led to the opposition's boycott of that meeting.
Sure. Well, the decision really to boycott the meeting came down to the Deputy Speaker's refusal of my motion of no confidence in the Speaker. Mm-hmm. That was the straw that broke the camel's back,
yes.
Proverbially.
Yes.
To be honest with you, Austin, I had given up really on our being able to do anything about it because we had gotten to the point where, Parliament was starting on a Wednesday, and we had met, we'd set the agenda, and everything was done. Our motion of no confidence in the government was slated to be heard first on that Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we got notice that the government had persuaded the Speaker to delay it by Parliament by 2 days.
Yes.
And what came out next was late Thursday evening was a motion of confidence being brought by the government bench, backbench, a motion of confidence in the government. So we knew what their game plan then was. But that told me as well that we also had an opportunity because, Austin, we waited and we waited and we waited in terms of this whole issue of the Speaker and his need for him to step aside.
Yes.
And that delay gave us an opportunity then to bring that motion of no confidence. So for me, it really was a matter of principle because the Premier should have been doing this, not me.
Yeah.
And it was his responsibility to bring such a motion to remove the Speaker, but he wouldn't do it, didn't do it. So I acted, and that's what it was for me. So on the Friday afternoon, we filed a motion of no confidence. And lo and behold, we find that when it was considered by the Deputy Speaker, because it couldn't have been considered by the Speaker himself because it concerned him, there would have been a strong conflict there. So he was hopelessly conflicted. So it went to the Deputy Speaker, and she wrote on the Wednesday and gave me reasons as to why she had done so. And the reason she gave was that she said it was out of time.
Right.
Well, we don't believe it was out of time. We think that was a very dubious and incorrect reasoning and rationale for doing so. And I called her out on it in a response, and I asked her to reconsider. And, there was just deafening silence. There was never a response from her with regard to it. And
I see.
I suspect they know.
Yes.
They very well knew. At the very least, she should have maybe consulted with the Premier, who's an attorney, and would have been able to advise her on what the proper interpretation of the standing orders and the interpretation law would have been. And the Speaker did as well. She gave the correct answer when she told us the deadline for filing of the motions was Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. We filed it long before 5 o'clock on Friday.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of shenanigans going on that were played throughout that whole process. But for us, ultimately, the decision to stay out of Parliament was one of a principle. We had to stand against that, just no change, and one of trying to show our displeasure that we just cannot continue with the same old business as usual with regard to the behavior of the former Speaker.
Indeed. Now, certainly you've spoken about this point before, about the relative inexperience of members on the PACT administration, and certainly that includes the Deputy Speaker. But in an effort to help remove that inexperience and provide certainly a guide map, that's what the standing orders are. And Standing Order 24-5, clearly sets out the timeline for motions, and there is no ambiguity. So she was wrong.
Well, bottom line is, yes, you're right, she was wrong. And at the very least, she ought to have consulted with the advisor to Parliament, being the Attorney General. But it would appear to me as if that was not done, and she acted, on her own. And I would surmise, I guess, if I could say so, that she did so in consultation with the Premier, and he was probably complicit.
Yeah, indeed. Now, again, the decision by the Deputy Speaker to deny the motion of no confidence in the Speaker on the grounds that we've just covered was a reason for the boycott. But you also were quoted as calling the proceedings of the day a sham. Why such strong language?
Well, I felt it necessary, given the strong-handed way in which the government members had behaved when it came to handling our motions and their efforts to derail them. And let's be honest here, brutally honest here, they were successful in doing so. That it really made a sham and a mockery of the whole parliamentary system. You can read within the Bible of parliamentary procedure, Erskine May, and it talks about motions of no confidence and the importance of them being heard in Parliament. Not just being heard, but being heard very quickly. That it should be given prominence. And they tried, and they were successful in reducing that and eliminating that completely. So what I would say is, yes, the opposition, we were completely blunted and silenced, really, by the actions of the government.
All right. Mr. McTaggart, you were further quoted in the media as stating, and I quote, that under this government, a PAC government, we are rapidly becoming a kangaroo parliament and a violation of all democratic principles of parliament. You further charge the PAC administration of bullying and being heavy-handed in their controversial decision to replace, as you stated, the opposition motion of no confidence in the government with what many have said is an unprecedented a motion of confidence in the government by the government. Yeah. You can't make this stuff up. Talk to us about that unprecedented motion, and certainly the sense that you received as an opposition in that replacing order, because certainly motions of no confidence are treated traditionally, you mentioned Erskine May, as a priority because of the subject matter.
Yeah, and you're dead right, Austin. And that's why I talk about those things, and I use that very strong language with that regard, because they use their sheer numbers in the Business Committee to achieve their own agenda and to stymie the opposition, and that is never good politics at the end of the day, Austin. Yeah. I always agree, and I always remember some of my colleagues in the previous governments, particularly Mr. Arden McLean, who he always had a saying, that the opposition must have its say, but the government will have its way. Yes. We understand that, but it's never good politics just simply stymie and silence an opposition. That is effectively what they did by putting their motion of confidence in the government first, because it rendered our motion almost to the point of uselessness.
Sure.
In terms of achieving what we wanted. I mean, there are no real consequences for that motion of confidence in the government, because immediately every one of them were going to be voting for it. But a motion of no confidence could have had some really serious consequences, and I suspect that is something that they were quite worried about or afraid of.
Yeah.
Because we know now that once the motion was filed, that the Premier set about very quickly to try and rally his troops together, all of his government together, and try to restore some sense of cooperation and unity amongst them. So it'll be interesting to see how long it lasts,
Yes.
and where it does end up. At the end of the day, if the effect of it all is that they do have come together and can truly put their differences aside and work together for the betterment of the country and last out the remaining term, more power to them.
Yes.
That's what I think. No one really wants to see a government fail, and that in itself brings a real negative feelings and consequences, I think, to a country in the way it is viewed, that you get a false a government that actually fails and falls. That's never really good, and nobody really wants that.
Yes, indeed. Well, certainly, while your motion of no confidence in the government failed to hit its mark, I think your steadfast, when I say you're the opposition, steadfast refusal to participate in the meetings and the principled position upon which you took, that is that members of Parliament should conduct themselves as an example to others, I think was certainly viewed favorably within the public domain. And certainly your refusal to participate, ironically, ultimately led to the Speaker's final resignation. Initially, he gave himself 60 days to leave office, which, of course, you would not have. And then before the meeting concluded, it was a resignation with immediate effect. Again, talk to us about, first of all, your decision to move out, to not participate, and certainly the impact it had on the Speaker's ultimate resignation.
Well, our decision not to participate was not taken very lightly.
Yeah.
But we felt, and I felt personally, that it was best that we do so when I saw on that Friday morning that the Speaker was taking the seat. We sat around waiting and to see who would actually be in the chair on that morning. And Austin, I had every expectations that it might be, the Deputy Speaker, that she would take the chair. But when I saw that, I just asked my colleagues, look, I said to them, we really can't go in here and do that and support that. Just business as usual. Something needs to change. And we needed to register our disquiet and our opposition to this in the most strenuous and strongest way that I could. And I felt that it really, the strongest way that we could do it and best way to do it would be to just boycott it. Because to me, it's more than just politicking. It was a matter of principle.
Yes.
That we just could not continue as we had. And I said that several times leading up to the meeting when all of this started to unfold. We just cannot continue and have business as usual. Change needed to happen. And I honestly, I'm glad that that is the case now. And that, yes, ultimately the Speaker did see and recognize that and give his resignation. So I'm grateful for the changes that have taken place. And, as a legislator, I'm looking forward to the next sitting when we will elect the Speaker's successor.
Indeed. Sir, I think it's fair to say that, whether it be the blogs or social media, that the public sentiment was largely in support of the opposition's principled position to boycott Parliament. However, there have been some critics, including the government, who have suggested the opposition was being hypocritical in their position, and it was less about principles and more about hypocrisy. How would you respond to those critics?
Well, Austin, I think the criticisms that they're levying are going back to 2020, when we had the issue as well again with the Speaker.
Yes.
Similar, accusations. In that case, he was actually, charged and pleaded guilty. So I think that's what they are referring to. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember, we did act. And at the end of the day, the decision then based on what we knew and what was taking place, felt it best to put the question then back into the hands of the public and the voters, really. And so we decided to end our term early in order to give the public that opportunity. Nothing hypocritical about that.
Yeah.
You know, what is hypocritical very clearly are the statements made by the Premier and members of, particularly him, let's just say limited there, that he made at the time with regard to it, and his actions now with regard to the Speaker, and in that he took no action whatsoever and remained silent throughout the entire process of his final days in Parliament, an opportunity then to bring a motion to remove him from office, and refused to do it, and stymied our motion. Yes, with regard to it. So I don't see any hypocrisy there at all. I would just remind everyone really too that I'm now the leader of the Progressives, and I bring my own style, and I bring my own way of doing things to this whole process of that we call politics. And I've got a very capable and able deputy as well.
Indeed.
And we work together as a team, and that these were things that we collectively, decisions that we made, and executed on them.
Indeed. And if I may add, your background and character are to this day beyond reproach.
Thank you.
So, Mr. McTaggart, what happens next? First, with regards to the Speaker's position, and secondly, with regards to the remainder of this present government's term in office. Will the opposition now try to strike a balance and continue to work with the government as the opposition in finishing this administrative term?
Well, good question, Austin. In terms of the way forward now, the next step really when Parliament meets, then the first order of business will be to elect a new Speaker.
Yeah.
So that will be done. But as an opposition, we will continue to be an opposition, not just for opposition's sake, but to present the alternative to the government. So yes, we will work with them on things that we believe are right, and there are things that we will, as an opposition, should criticize and oppose. That's the nature of our parliamentary system.
Yes.
But absolutely certain, we will do so. And we've seen how we have demonstrated our working with the government. They brought many pieces of legislation which we had no comments on. We just said to government we support it, and it just sails right through Parliament.
Right.
I'm not there, we're not going to go in there and just to make noise or to speak just for the sake of doing so. If we've got things that are substantive and need to be said, we're going to say it.
Right.
And we are going to argue our points quite strongly. So what can the government expect? They can expect a very vibrant opposition. We'll continue to do our work and continue to do our job. And we'll go from there. And then we look forward to 2025 too.
Indeed.
That time period, it's 2.5 years away, but that time goes very quickly because we are just at the halfway point through this government's tenure.
Now, albeit you did boycott the last meeting, there were a raft of different motions, bills that were brought to the House. Were there any matters, business of Parliament brought that the opposition saw as objectionable?
None that were absolutely objectionable to us. There were things we would have argued for or asked to be done differently.
Right.
In particular, the financial assistance bill. We really would have liked to have seen the draft regulations as they existed.
Yeah.
Before actually voting on the bill, because as it was, the bill itself was very sparse. It was a very good framework.
Yes.
We all felt that. But we would have liked to seen more and to give it more substance, understand what the rules and regulations would be and how it was likely to operate.
Right.
And I think that part of it we would like to have seen it, but I don't think we certainly would not have opposed that. There was no legislation there we would have outright opposed. The other piece of legislation, the amendment to the traffic law, which lowered the legal age for not the legal age, the
legal limit.
Legal limits for driving whilst intoxicated.
Yes.
I had put forward an amendment to the law the government brought it down to 0.07% blood alcohol level. I had put forward an amendment to go back up to 0.08. And I did that because, first of all, Cayman was a real outlier at where it was at 0.1%. Yeah. We were off the scale there, about the only one in the world with it at that level anymore. I felt that 0.7, probably 0.07%, went a little bit low because I couldn't find very many countries at that level. In fact, when I looked, and I spent a couple hours on the internet searching, I could only find Honduras as one country that had 0.07%. There may have been others. I don't know.
Right.
And when I looked at it, the vast majority of the developed and industrialized world, US, Canada, UK, a whole bunch, raft of other countries were all at 0.08.
Right.
And so I felt that was probably the right amount of where it should be. But anyway, 0.07%, I wasn't going to not support it.
Yes.
If I didn't get my way with it. I would gladly have supported it because I felt we were so far, in one corner, and I was never really comfortable with it in recent times. Just felt it did and does need to change.
Sure.
And so I'm glad for the Premier bringing it and getting it done.
Indeed. And to your point, depending on a person's constitution, 0.07 is relatively 2, maybe 3 beers.
Yeah.
So we can anticipate a lot more roadblocks given these new otherwise guidelines that the police have to work with. But again, it's a safety issue, and I think we all will agree we have far too many deaths on the road as it is. So again, something that would otherwise get the opposition's
and I agree with you completely on that, Austin. There's no way I could argue otherwise.
Right.
Something needed to change, and I'm glad that we got it done. And I think, once once it's brought into law, which I think it'll probably come into effect very quickly, then the police do have a more of a weapon now to go after people, and it'll only take a few charges and convictions that I believe you will see a real change in people's behaviors.
Absolutely.
And that needs to happen. If that accomplishes it, then so be it.
Indeed.
It
and
needs
again,
to happen.
To the audience, I think it's a fantastic example of what you said earlier on, that as an opposition, you're not going to oppose for opposition's sake. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea, and it's going to have the support of the opposition. Finally, Mr. Leader, there's a lot of talk on the street, obviously, about who the Speaker's replacement will be. From a procedural standpoint, does the opposition have any say in all of that, or will it be a matter for the government to decide, and then the House, Parliament will have to take a vote on it?
Well, I mean, the lead has to be taken by the government, and they will, no doubt. So when we come to the House, they will put forward their nominee to the House. But I mean, they from the chair, whoever's sitting in the chair, the Deputy Speaker, she will also call for other nominations in addition to the government. So the opposition as well will have an opportunity to put forward a nominee. Now, I've not discussed any of this with my colleagues as to where we are and what we might do. I think we just wait to see who the government brings forward. And, so there are a number of moving parts here that have to come together before you see where and how this all takes place. But, it'll be interesting again. I mean, if you remember correctly, back when when we were all sworn in and the vote was taking place for the Speaker, and Mr. Bush was proposed, I actually got up and nominated Ms. Barbara Connolly as the Speaker, and I did that failed, and I again put her forward for Deputy Speaker, and that failed. But we had that opportunity. Yes. And there was a proper vote that took place, and so democracy was seen at its finest. It did its work.
All right, indeed. Mr. McTaggart, I want to thank you again for taking the time to join us and certainly share your perspective on the proceedings of the first meeting of Parliament for the 2022-2023 session. Hopefully the second meeting will be less controversial, but that remains to be seen. I want to give you an opportunity for some closing comments at this time.
Well, I certainly thank you for taking the time to interview me with regard to these matters, Austin. I've heard the criticisms, and I hope I've been able to set the record straight to the public and with regard to our views on what happened and why they took place. And I hope they understand the reasons why we did so. I mean, that is critical and that is important for the public to understand. I take my job seriously, yes. And I don't do things on a whim and a willy-nilly. I think them through, and I think them through clearly and properly before I make a decision to do what I do. And I felt in the times and the circumstances that it warranted a very response from the opposition in the strongest of terms.
Indeed.
And hey, look at what we accomplished.
Absolutely.
And
indeed.
I don't have a problem taking credit for it because we have beat this drum for a long time, and it has resulted in accomplishing what we thought was needed, yes, within the Parliament for it in terms of its stability and its future operations. I also want the public to understand and appreciate that it became clear to us as time passed that the Speaker was not going to do as he had been invited to do by the Premier, who had written to him, given him a deadline. That deadline come and pass, and there was no action, no word, nothing. Dead silence, radio silence from the Premier. That it needed a response from us. This was an issue that really the Premier was the one who would be responsible for acting and doing what he did. And he neglected that. He did not do what he should have done. And so I felt as the opposition, if he wouldn't do it, then it would become my responsibility to do just that for him and force the issue. And that was to bring about that vote of no confidence in the Speaker. So.
Absolutely. Well, certainly I know from experience that the decision to boycott any meeting is never taken lightly and is never an easy decision. But in this instance, certainly it served its purpose. And in the end, the desired result happened. And again, we thank you very much for taking the time. I think the discussion has been very informative. And I think the public certainly did deserve to hear the opposition side of this conversation, and they certainly have had that opportunity here today. So again, thank you very much for being our guest in studios.
Thank you too. Pleasure.
Indeed. And to our listening audiences, as always, we say thank you for taking the time to tune in, and hope you enjoyed today's conversation and our guest as much as we did. If you did, remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And if there's a discussion you would like us to present here on Let's Talk, please feel free to leave those suggestions in your comments. Please remember to tune in every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. for another episode of Let's Talk, exploring the issues affecting all of our lives. I'm your host, Austin Harris. Until next time.